Boldwood presents Let Her Go, written by Alison Stockham and read by Julie Maisie. Prologue. Oh God, is this it? Libby's pulse was hammering through her veins like a steam train through a tunnel. Its steady beat made her feel both dizzy and painfully aware of how alive she was, currently. Her breath stuttered as the reality of the situation she found herself in fully hit her. Is this it? She could see the gun from where she was, frozen to the spot. She had popped to her favourite boutique at lunchtime to do some window shopping. Payday was still a week or so away, and she couldn't justify buying anything, no matter how small, until then. Everything here cost way more than realistically she should be spending anyway. But she had stumbled into it once when she had been rage-walking to calm down after she'd found out just how much Matt had spent on his new gaming console. She and Matt were supposed to be saving for house renovations, or a trip, or for the baby that she knew they would never have. And yet there he was, dropping hundreds on the latest console. She had found this gorgeous shop, selling carefully curated pieces from a range of designers, perfectly crafted to sell you the lifestyle that the items hinted at. She hadn't been able to resist. Since then, she had come in regularly to try on elements of a life that she didn't have, and occasionally she would let herself buy small pieces that would permit her to lie to herself about ever getting the whole picture. Now, she was lying on the floor, with her hands on her head, watching the men in balaclavas, with guns in their hands, forcing the terrified shop assistant to open the till. Libby couldn't help but think to herself that they had clearly never shopped in a boutique like this. No one paid in cash. They were about to be seriously disappointed, and that might make them angry. Oh God. If they got angry, what would they do? Would they want to rifle through the bags of the few people in here to see if they had cash on them? They ought to steal the products, the bags, the accessories. High-value small pieces would sell on resale sites for sure. But Libby assumed that was way more traceable than cold, hard cash. "Open the till now!" the taller of the men yelled, and the shop assistant literally squealed in terror. Not surprising, really, seeing as the taller gunman's accomplice decided to make himself part of the scenario by poking her in the shoulder with his own gun as if to hammer the point home. Libby knew she ought not to be looking, but she was fascinated. If she was going to die here, in this shop where she shouldn't have been in the first place, she was at least going to see everything. It was like being in a movie. Nothing exciting ever happened, and now here she was in the middle of a heist. It didn't feel real, and she was appalled by how she seemed to be enjoying it. "Oi, you! You there, in the grey jacket! Yes, you!" the shorter man yelled, and Libby's stomach dropped as she realised he was talking to her. "Me?" "Yeah, get up here, now!" She did as she was told, her knees shaking. As she got close enough, he grabbed her by the neck and pushed the end of his gun, cold and hard, against the side of her jaw. Her blood ran cold. This had suddenly got a lot less entertaining. He turned back to the shop assistant. "I will shoot her before I shoot you, so you can see what it looks like. I mean it! Now where is the cash?" "I keep telling you, we don't keep large amounts on site. Most clients don't pay with it. We're mostly cashless. There just isn't any to take." Libby, surprised at how calm she was, felt pride for having already worked out what these fools had not. They were barking up the wrong tree. They'd have been far better going for the newsagents at the end of the road, or the cafe on the corner. More customers, larger footfall, more cash-based than somewhere like this. Honestly, had they not thought about this at all? The guy with the gun pushed it again into her jaw, making his point clear to the shaking lady he was shouting at. What were they saying? Libby had stopped listening, disassociating to stop herself from freaking out at the sheer level of danger she was in. These guys were not getting their own way. This was going wrong. What might they do in frustration? She should have been thinking about loved ones, but she was just thinking about all the things she hadn't done yet. All the things she might now not get to do, places she might not get to see. She'd been treading water, and now she might have run out of time. She had always had big plans, and yet here she was, 30 already, and not having achieved any of them. More to the point, she'd somehow given up on even working towards them. She wasn't a has-been, or a never was. She was a not even on the charts. She felt sick. She'd spent so long doing what she was told she was supposed to be doing, so long taking the next step up the ladder without really thinking if the ladder was where she even wanted to be. "Please, there's nothing I can do." The shrill voice of the shop assistant brought Libby back to reality, and somehow, something inside her clicked. "Look," she said in her calmest, most authoritarian voice. "She's already told you multiple times that there's no cash. You know that the shop alarm will have been triggered and you're running out of time before the police get here. So either take some stuff that you can sell or take the cash you've already been given and get going. Stop wasting everyone's time. You won't harm anyone because then when they catch you, and they will catch you," she said, pointing up at the CCTV camera in the corner of the room, "that means that you'll be going to jail for a much longer time. Why risk it?" Libby felt the man's hold on her loosen, the reality of her words sinking in. He knew she was right. She felt emboldened by his pause. "You could just let me go and run, you know?" She took a small step away and turned to look at him. Even with his balaclava on, she could see from his eyes that he was panicking. If she could have seen his skin, she knew he would be sweaty. This was it. He was either going to lose it and start shooting, or he would listen to her and run. She held her breath. This was the moment that life was supposed to flash before her eyes, and Libby didn't like what she saw. This couldn't be how it ended. Part 1. Hannah. Chapter 1. 6 days earlier. Hannah leant back against the warm slats of the wooden hot tub, closed her eyes and sighed, breathing in the steam as yellow rose petals floated on the surface of the water. She took in and let out a deep breath and could practically feel every sinew in her body relax as she let go of the week's stresses. "God, I wish every Friday evening was like this," she said, opening her eyes and pushing herself up out of the warm water, just long enough to reach for the chilled glass of champagne that the waitress was proffering from the side of the tub. She took hold of its chilled surface, droplets of condensation slowly making their way down its side, and held it to her lips as she let the bubbly liquid pour down her throat, chilling her deliciously as it did so. "This is the life, isn't it?" Libby said, as she sat opposite her, lifting her toes out of the water to wiggle them in the cool evening air. "I could get used to this. Don't look at my toes, though," she said, abruptly, pulling her feet back under the surface, out of sight again. "My pedie is a mess." Hannah smiled. Libby always held herself to such high standards. Hannah wished she could relax about it sometimes and see the person that she could see. Hannah chose her friends carefully, a small number but chosen with thought for who they were, not what they looked like. And besides, Libby was gorgeous. "Your toes are fine, Libs. You know you're beautiful, top to toe." Hannah laughed and splashed water towards Libby. Libby mouthed, "Thank you," at Hannah, then raised her glass in the air, making a dramatic flourish as she toasted them both. "To weekends away from it all. To all things beautiful, including friends." Cheers to that, Hannah said, before downing her drink and signalling to the waitress for top-ups. More champagne? No point opening a bottle if we're going to waste it. Libby half smiled and drank the rest of her glass too. Hannah could see some of the tension drifting from Libby's face, but not all of it. She knew her well enough to know that something wasn't right. They'd booked this weekend ages ago as one of their regular getaways. On these trips, they always talked almost non-stop about everything and nothing, but Libby was quiet this evening, and that wasn't normal for her. Not talking was not her style. "What's up?" Hannah asked gently. Something was off, but Libby would never bring it up unless pushed. But thankfully, Hannah knew when to push and when to back off. Libby looked down into the bubbles and took another sip. "It's nothing. It's fine." She shook her head and forced a smile, her lips curving the smallest amount upwards. Her eyes stayed dull, like the cloudy twilight sky above as the evening stretched out around them. "Is it? It doesn't look like nothing," Hannah said gently. Libby sighed, taking another sip of champagne as she stared out into the distance. Hannah also looked away, not wanting to force things, allowing Libby to speak in her own time. Trying to ignore her own unease at the situation, Hannah leant out of the tub and picked up her phone in slippery hands, looking as though she was checking the time, but surreptitiously looking at Libby from the corner of her eye. She could see that she was formulating something in her mind, working out how to say what was bothering her. Finally, Libby spoke. "It's Matt." Hannah crinkled her brow. "What about Matt?" "Was he unhappy about me stealing his wife for the weekend? You're mine too, you know," she laughed, trying to lighten Libby's mood. Libby's mouth didn't smile, staying taut in a straight line, wobbling lightly as though she was trying hard not to cry. Hannah clocked this and put down her glass, shifting along the integral seat of the hot tub until she was next to Libby rather than across from her. "Libs, what's up? What's the matter?" Libby looked down while she spoke, her words barely a whisper. "I think he's cheating on me." Hannah felt as though she had been punched in the chest. All the air inside her lungs seemed to evaporate. That couldn't be true. "No," was all she could muster. Libby took another long sip of champagne, but winced as she swallowed, as though it hurt her to drink it. She nodded. "Yes, I think he is." "What makes you think that? Surely he wouldn't do that, not to you." Hannah felt light-headed suddenly. The heat of the water, the champagne before food, and the news that the one relationship that made her believe in actual love was potentially a lie, all suddenly making her feel like she was in a dinghy on choppy seas. She reached for some water, knowing that this was not actually her crisis, but that somehow it felt like it was. She knew she needed to shake that feeling off. She needed to be a supportive friend right now. "I don't want to ruin the weekend. It's expensive and you paid for us and don't worry about that. Spending time with you is never a waste. And I'm your friend, not a Hannah couldn't find the words. "A spa robot." What? That's what she could come up with? How much champagne had she had? Libby burst out laughing. "A spa robot? What the hell is one of those?" A smile broke over her face. "You always know what to say. How do you do that?" "Well, I have known you over a decade now. God, is it that long? Freshers' Week seems like it could almost have been last month." Libby put her hands to her forehead. "My wrinkles say otherwise." "Psst, you don't look a day over 21. I feel about 100. Look, he's not right. We had a huge row the other day and—" "You never said." Libby looked annoyed but continued. "We had a huge row about our spending, or rather, my continual lack of it because of his continual overspending." You know how much work the house needs, and now he's attentive. Like listening to what I'm saying, paying attention, being extra kind. He bought flowers for me the other day just because. For no reason. He's not done that since we were first married. Something's not right. Hannah shook her head. So, you're saying you had a fight, and now he's being how you want him to be, and that's wrong? She raised her eyebrows, tilting her head towards Libby. No, it's not like that. I'm not being an idiot, Libby snapped. What's the point? You always take his side anyway. I do not. What do you mean? Hannah was genuinely shocked. She was a girl's girl, or at least she was when it came to Libby. Boys came and went, that much was clear, but friends were forever, if you were lucky. Oh, nothing. You're always so reasonable. Sometimes I just need to vent. Sorry, I'm literal-minded, you know that. At work, it's A plus B equals C, just how it is. Sometimes I find it hard to switch that side of my brain off. You know how it is with work. Don't. You know I hate my job. I spend my days trying to work out how to get out of there, not focused on the task in hand. Sorry. Look, let's get back to Matt. He adores you, so I'm finding it really hard to work out what makes you think he's cheating. I mean, you are everything to him. I hang out with you both all the time, and he's like your shadow. Was. Libby shivered, and Hannah could see that goosebumps were forming on her skin above the waterline. The evening was cooling rapidly. Look, Hannah said, glancing around at the dwindling number of people still in the hot tubs. Why don't we get out of here, get showered, and we could talk this out over dinner? I'm not really in the mood for dinner, to be honest. It's included, Hannah said, hoping to sound enticing. Libby's mouth set in a hard line. Hannah knew she wasn't going to win this one. Something was clearly properly wrong. OK, how about we go to the room, get into cosy PJs, and we can order room service, and we can talk all this through? God, I'm sorry. I'm just all over the place. Tears welled in Libby's eyes. I don't know if everything... Her voice lowered to a whisper. It's falling apart. Nothing is how it's supposed to be. I feel like my whole life is a sham. She swallowed hard, trying to keep her composure. Don't even worry about it. We will fix this, I promise, Hannah said decidedly as she stood up and got out of the tub. Libby followed her, and they put on their complimentary spa slippers and robes and made their way silently through the twilight-lit garden, the violet air scented with the hints of the incoming spring, still mixed with that bite of winter, the one that smelled of leaves and cold and earth. Hannah stopped to breathe it in, aware that the evening might not be as celebratory as she'd hoped. Back in the room, Libby took so long in the shower that Hannah took it upon herself to order room service for them both. She knew Libby as well as she knew herself, and so she ordered what she knew Libby would want, a mix of decadent and comforting, all displayed beautifully enough when it arrived to make it to her Instagram grid. Oh my God, you didn't, Libby said as she exited the bathroom in a cloud of sweetly scented steam, smiling at Hannah as she looked at the trolley, draped in a white linen cloth with silver cloches on top. I was just thinking in the shower that I was being overly dramatic and we ought to just go down to dinner, but this? It looks like something out of a movie. Oh, did you order Diet Coke and more champagne? Not to go together, obviously, but if this is both a pamper evening and a serious chat, then we need both, right? Along with chips, mac and cheese, salad, fruit and chocolate cake, Hannah said, checking her order off in her head before lifting a dome to show the contents underneath. Libby's face broke into a wide smile. You are the best. The absolute best. You know that. Let me throw on my PJs and we can tuck in. I'm suddenly beyond hungry. Me too. Libby grabbed her clothes and disappeared back into the bathroom to change. Hannah picked up the drinks and the fruit bowl and placed them on the bedside tables to give more space to eat. Her stomach grumbled at her, and she found her mouth watering as the creamy, tangy scent of the mac and cheese wafted across the room, and she picked up a small bunch of grapes from the bowl to stop her from diving into the food. After what felt like an age, Libby came out of the bathroom looking like a tiny marshmallow wrapped in her PJs and dry, fluffy hotel bathrobe. "I'm sorry for taking so long. Let's eat," she said, heading straight for the trolley, first taking out her phone and snapping a picture of the spread for the gram, and then wordlessly filling one plate and then another before handing the first to Hannah, who took it gratefully. "Eat, then talk?" Hannah asked. Libby nodded in response and started slowly loading her fork with the pasta. Strings of cheese pulled away from the main helping of the dish, and both of them chuckled as the mozzarella did an Instagram-worthy cheese pull, with Libby having to wrap strands of it around her fork before it finally snapped. They ate in silence until both plates had been finished. Libby sipped at her Diet Coke, her expression blank. Hannah placed her plate down, popped the champagne, and swapped Libby's plate for a glass before taking her own and plumping herself down on the bed. "Right, tell me everything." Libby took a deep breath and a sip of the champagne. It fizzed on her lips, and she brought her hand to her face to catch the drips. Hannah could see that her hand was shaking. "I'm scared to say it out loud because if I do, then all my just fears are going to seem very real suddenly." "Yes, maybe, but we're best friends. We do real." "True. Whatever it is, it can't be that bad." "It can. So, you know I said we'd rowed about his spending? Yeah, I know he's pretty bad at remembering that bills aren't optional, especially when faced with a bargain. Well, that wasn't really it. We were rowing already, and I wanted to move the heat away from me, so I started yelling about his spending." Hannah looked confused. "Why would you do that? Why bring in a second thing to argue about?" "Because babies." "What about them?" Libby bit her lip. "He's changed his mind." Hannah's eyes widened, and her mouth opened in a shocked O. "Right. What can I do with that?" Libby asked, a horrified look on her face. "But he's always known that you don't want them. You've always said that. You want to work on saving the world as it is, rather than adding to overpopulation." Saving the world, honestly. How naive was I? But Libby blushed and looked down at her hands, fiddling with her wedding ring and picking at her nails, the paint on which was starting to peel. We'd just had a really romantic evening. He'd cooked this amazing meal, everything from scratch on his afternoon off, and I'd had a shocking day at work. He'd pampered me from the moment I'd stepped in the door, taking my coat, bringing me a drink. He'd set the table like we were in a restaurant, dim lighting, candles lit, music playing. Honestly, if we'd not been married already, I'd have assumed he was about to propose. Which, I guess, in a way, he was, as he did have a proposal. "What do you mean?" "Well, he orchestrated this romantic evening. Dinner, he'd run me a bubble bath, then he gave me a massage, full-on sensual moves, then we had sex twice in a row, and as we were lying there afterwards, he dropped the clanger." Hannah blushed. They always talked about their sex lives to some extent, but this somehow felt more intimate than before. She would always tell Libby everything, but because Hannah knew Matt, because the three of them hung out so often, because she was sort of the third wheel in the relationship, Libby was always more euphemistic when talking about their sex life, giving it a slight nod, wink quality that helped it feel less intrusive. Now she was laying it all out there. "What did he say?" Libby suddenly looked less scared, more angry. He said he'd been thinking and thinking about how he felt a little aimless now we've settled into our grown-up lives, and how I'm always complaining about how work is unfulfilling, and how the change I wanted to make is always being hampered by relentless bureaucracy and paperwork and red tape. I guess that is sort of true. Yeah, maybe it is, but that's beside the point. Libby looked peeved. 'Cause it's where he went with it. He started stroking my stomach in a really weird way, and then said maybe we ought to have a family. Maybe it's time. Ah. And I said that we'd talked about it, and we had, at length, before we got married, and I'd always been clear that it's not what I want. What did he say to that? That things change, people change, and he'd sort of assumed I didn't mean it. I mean, for fuck's sake. She rage-swigged at her champagne, downing the glass before walking over to refill it. This was why Hannah had ordered the bottle. Truth always came out easier with an accompaniment of alcohol, and with Libby, she found that the additional drama, of the alcohol of choice being champagne, emboldened her to spill the tea. Hannah knew how she ticked. Better than Matt, it seemed. I'm confused, though, Hannah said, as Libby turned to top up her champagne as well, pouring so heavily that she tested the limits of the volume of the flute. I don't get why him wanting to have children suddenly means he's cheating. Didn't he just ask for the next big commitment from you? To want to have a family with you? How does that mean he's being unfaithful? Hannah gasped as a possibility came to her. You don't think he's already having an affair and has got someone else pregnant, do you? Libby paled. Her eyes flickered from left to right as her booze-fuddled brain processed the thought, which had obviously not occurred to her. No, she faltered. She paced the room as her mind worked before turning to face Hannah directly. No, I don't think he's talking about someone else's baby, or... She raised her finger to stop Hannah interrupting, which she had opened her mouth to do. No, there is no other baby. I don't even really know for sure that there's another woman. Things are different. Hannah shook her head. This scenario didn't make sense. I just can't see him doing that to you. I don't want to undermine your suspicions, but it feels wrong to me. He's totally yours. No, you're right. Maybe I'm spiraling. It's just... He's pulled the rug out from underneath me. I thought I knew what we both wanted, and I thought it was the same. And now? Now I don't know what we're doing. If we both want fundamentally different things, because I haven't and won't change my mind about children, it's just not going to happen. And if he's been lying to me about being okay with that, about agreeing with that... Well, then what sort of marriage do we actually have? Okay, so now is why I ordered the chocolate cake. We need sugar, Hannah said, taking a plate with a piece of thick, fudgy chocolate cake covered in frosting and sprinkled with chocolate curls and handing it to Libby. Okay, he loves you. Okay, these things are not evidence of cheating. Okay, aren't they? Hannah scrunched up her face. No, you spoon. They are concerns and worries, and valid ones, but you've not said anything that makes me think Matt is cheating on you. He's been working late, a lot. And he hates his job. Maybe he's working overtime to pay off some of your debt. His debt. I know we're married, our finances are joined in theory, but the overspending is his. All his. Hannah didn't mention the designer shoes that Libby had packed to wear for the dinner that they were not at. Still, maybe he's working to get rid of it. So that we have enough money to have kids? Libby asked exasperatedly. So that you can do whatever you want without it hanging over you. He knows you hate it. Maybe he's just grown up enough to deal with it. You've been together since we were teenagers. Maybe he's only now being an adult about these things. He's bringing me flowers every Friday. Because he loves you, and they're a relatively small indulgence. Or he's got a guilty conscience. Honestly, Libs, I don't think you've got anything to worry about. I can't see him cheating on you. I can't see him ever leaving you, or even ever wanting to. You're his world. You have been since he laid eyes on you that first time. Really? Really? She reached out and took Libby's hand, and as she did so, Hannah felt a wash of gratitude come over her that she could be the one to make Libby feel better, to reassure her that she was blowing things out of proportion. Sure, the kids thing was an issue, but if she said the right thing now, she would be able to snap Libby out of this funk. They could still have their lovely weekend away, and all would go back to how things always were. Matt and Libby, perfect and in love, and Hannah, their ever-supportive friend. Hannah would be there, on the sidelines, doing whatever was needed of her. Chapter 2. It was late on Sunday morning when Hannah opened her eyes. It had been a long and tedious week, and Hannah had spent much of it worrying about what Libby had told her at the spa. She had stayed up late the night before, wasting time mainly, rather than leaning into her choice of not meeting up with people she barely knew, not going out, preferring the quiet and solitude of her own home after a busy week at work. She was happy to be home by herself, but going to bed early felt a bit dull somehow, so she'd stayed up too late, mindlessly scrolling on her phone. Even still, she was shocked to find that it was nudging 11 when she opened her eyes and checked the clock. She lay there, staring at the ceiling as the day's light spread across it. The house was still, silent, empty. She reached over to check her phone. No messages. Hannah had messaged Libby last night, reminding her of their table reservation for today like she always did. Libby hadn't replied. Nor, it seemed, had she even seen the message. Nor the one from earlier in the day, when Hannah had been ranting about her boss, Jackie, who had been entirely unreasonable, calling her into work that Saturday morning, just for a little while, as she knew she wouldn't be busy. Nor the one she'd sent first thing on Friday, wishing Libby good luck. She'd had a presentation scheduled, and Hannah had wanted to show that she was thinking about her. Maybe it had been a busy week for Libby, too. No matter, they were due to meet this morning for their monthly brunch at Libby's favourite place. She'd get the lowdown over baked eggs or pancakes, with coffee and juice, and maybe a pastry. Hannah's stomach rumbled. She hadn't bothered to make even toast for dinner last night. She'd had a banana and called it done, as sometimes cooking for one got so tedious she couldn't face it. She hopped out of bed and into the shower before getting ready and heading out to their brunch place. "Morning, Julie." Hannah smiled at the waitress, who often looked after them. "Morning, love. Usual table?" "Yes, please. Am I the first one here?" Hannah said, scanning the room. She had a bit of a habit of unintentionally being 5 minutes late for everything, so being the first to arrive was unusual for her. Normally by now, Libby would be sat at the table, sipping the mimosa she'd already ordered, with a side of fruit for her to pick at while she waited. Hannah sat down and made herself comfortable. "Can I get you anything while you wait? The usual?" Julie asked as she hovered at the table. "Yeah, sure. Thanks. I'm sure Libby will be along soon." Julie nodded and headed to put in the order at the bar. Hannah took out her phone to check it again. Still nothing, and now it was 10 minutes after their agreed meeting time. She couldn't see when Libby had last been online either. She typed out a quick message. "Hey, everything okay? Mimosa's being made as I type. See you soon." Before she put her phone down, Hannah then opened up a message thread with Matt. He'd been online this morning, so if anything was up, he'd have let her know. He knew that they always met the last Sunday of the month. He went and did a boxing session with his mate, while the girls put the world to rights. Gender stereotypical it might have been, but it suited everyone. "Still not here yet," Julie said, somewhat unnecessarily, when she brought the drinks over to the table, setting them down gently. "No, not yet. She's given me a taste of my own medicine." Hannah laughed, and Julie laughed too, just a little too enthusiastically for Hannah's liking. "I'm sure she'll be here soon." She wasn't. Half an hour passed. 2 more messages sent and not received. Hannah drank first her drink and then Libby's too, which was a mistake, as on no food they went straight to her brain, and she was drunk by the time she called her. "You've reached Libby's phone. Leave a message." "Libby, where are you? You're supposed to be here," Hannah said into her phone, while she tried not to sound as annoyed as she was. Was it too much to ask to let Hannah know if she couldn't make it? Then suddenly, Hannah's stomach dropped as a new thought occurred. "Are you okay? Did something happen? Let me know you're all right." "What's up?" Julie said as she came over at the sound of Hannah's voice rising in volume. "Yeah, no, I don't know." Hannah shook her head. She's never usually late. "I think maybe something has happened." "Do you think something has happened?" Hannah could hear how jittery she sounded. "I think you need some food," Julie said, smiling still but with a hint of concern. "Let me bring you some brunch. Pancakes? We have a banana bacon special today." "Sure, thanks. That sounds great," Hannah said absent-mindedly, as Julie gathered both menus away. She had no food at home and certainly no enthusiasm to prepare any even if she did. She would eat here, see if Libby turned up eventually, all apologies from having overslept or something equally understandable, and if not, she would call again and maybe pop round and check that all was as it should be. "Here you go, love, and I've brought some water for the table and our bottomless coffee." Julie dipped her head sympathetically as she placed things down in front of Hannah. "Thank you," Hannah said, suddenly ravenous. Julie could obviously see that Hannah was upset and had brought just what she needed, just like a mum would do, like her mum had done when Hannah was little, before she remarried after the divorce and had a second family, making Hannah feel like a hangover from a life that no longer existed for anyone but her. Her dad had sort of slipped out of the picture through inertia and disorganisation, and her mum's time was caught up with her younger half-siblings, and that was that. She heard a lot of, "I'm so relieved you're so self-sufficient," and "Your mum must be proud of how independent you are." But the truth was that she had been given no real choice, and the slivers of time when someone, like Julie, stepped up to care for her, even for a little while, both felt warm and wonderful, and an awful reminder of what she had lost. Swallowing her emotions as she ate, Hannah could feel herself becoming more alert as she made her way through the plate. There was still an irritation at the base of her stomach that Libby wasn't there, but she was sure there would be a reason. She'd forgotten. Unlikely. Libby never had before. She had overslept. Possible, especially if she'd not charged her phone, so her phone was dead and her alarm with it. Or something had happened. Something bad. At this thought, the pancakes somehow turned solid in her mouth, and swallowing them felt like she had rocks in her throat. No. Surely if something was wrong, then Matt would have called her, wouldn't he? Unless he was in the middle of dealing with whatever crisis this was. Hannah was important in their lives, obviously, but she knew she wouldn't be the first to be called in an emergency. She was not next of kin. She washed down her anxiety with a large gulp of too hot coffee, and it burned as it went down, spreading an uncomfortable heat along her throat until it sat in her chest, meeting the fear that now hung there. She picked up her phone, placed by the side of her plate in case Libby messaged, and opened up a news app to distract herself. The headline was something about the latest politician to show themselves up. No huge explosion or rail crash or disaster shouting bad news at her, at least. She scanned down the page and found nothing. She was about to open up her messages again and see if Libby had been online when she saw a smaller headline, barely making it onto the front page. Designer boutique targeted in armed raid. Something about the photo caught her eye, and Hannah clicked onto it to read further. That was the shop that Libby swooned over, wasn't it? Hannah knew it because she'd made a mental note of it when Libby had been going on and on about it and had popped by to take a look. "It's not fair," Libby had complained. "I work so hard, so many hours and do so much overtime, which is unpaid, of course, and I can barely afford the logo keyring that they only sell so that idiots like me can feel like they own a tiny piece of that life. I know it's just stuff, but their things are so beautiful. You must feel like you're walking on air when you wear something from there. The world just feels like a better place somehow." The photo accompanying the article was definitely the same shop. When had Libby last been in? Hannah knew that Libby often went there in her lunch break, especially when she was stressed, and she'd definitely been stressed lately. When they'd FaceTimed, Libby had been impatient and snappish. Libby's job wasn't going well and she was still worried about Matt, and Hannah had needed to remind herself not to take it personally. Lucia's of Magdalen Street, Cambridge, was targeted during Thursday lunchtime by armed raiders. Owner Lucia Serena said, "They got no cash as we don't keep it on site," but that her staff and customers were badly shaken by the incident. Police are investigating. What did they mean by badly shaken? Was that a euphemism? Was someone actually hurt, but they weren't able to report it? There were rules, weren't there, as to what newspapers could report when it was an active police case. What weren't they saying? Was Libby involved? Is that why she wasn't here? Why hadn't Matt called either? Hannah dialed Libby's number again and held the phone to her ear. Usually she wouldn't make one phone call in the middle of a restaurant, let alone two, and to be honest, she'd rather not make a phone call at all, even to Libby. But this wasn't normal. Something wasn't right. She could feel it in her bones. The phone rang and rang and rang until the voicemail kicked in. "Libby, it's Hannah again. I know about the boutique and I'm worried. Are you safe? I'm not annoyed about brunch, just let me know you're okay." She hung up and immediately tried Matt. That went to voicemail too. This wasn't good. "Matt, it's Hannah. Libby hasn't met me at brunch and I'm a little worried. Call me, please." She didn't want to sound OTT. She just needed someone to let her know Libby was okay. Who else could she call? Hannah slumped back in her chair, all thought of food abandoned. She looked down as she racked her brains. She had Libby's mum's landline number written down somewhere. She'd call her when she got home and found it. Julie, she shouted rudely across the restaurant, waving her arm to indicate she wanted to pay. Julie finished up with her other customers and came over. "Ready to go? No Libby today, then?" Hannah shook her head. She didn't have any words to speak with, so she stayed mute. She was too busy trying not to let her imagination get away with her. "Okay," Julie said, saying nothing but sounding surprised. Hannah tapped her foot against the floor as she waited for the card machine to go through the motions, before adding a big tip that she hoped would counteract her rudeness. After all, everything was fine, wasn't it? She was being ridiculous, wasn't she? She and Libby would be back here for their regular brunch again soon. Wouldn't they? Chapter 3. Hannah took a cab home while she scrolled through her phone for more information about the robbery. She scanned through news site after news site, but there was nothing else to report. Just that the store had been targeted and the robbers had been armed. No further mention of staff or customers, or if anyone had actually been hurt rather than just shaken, and no mention as to whether the raiders took anything when they couldn't get any cash. She reminded herself that as this was an ongoing crime investigation, there was little that the journalists could legally report. Forcing herself to take deep breaths, Hannah tried to think rationally. It was far more plausible that Libby had overslept than she had somehow been involved and hurt in an armed robbery. I mean, really, come on. Hannah's overactive imagination had got her into trouble before. She knew that she was spiralling without any solid information, filling in all the gaps with panic-based scenarios. All she knew was that she had been stood up. That was it. And that Libby and Matt were not answering their phones. And an armed raid had taken place. These three things were not necessarily connected, or connected in the specific way that Hannah was worried about. She needed to connect the dots in a way that actually delivered a full picture, rather than a messy scrawl, and right now she didn't have enough information to do that. "Thank you, all paid up on the app," the taxi driver said as he pulled up outside her house. "Thanks," Hannah managed to mumble as she turned to let herself in, the air inside still and unmoved. Her home was her sanctuary. She had bought it for a bargain because it was a complete fixer-upper, and she had spent all her time and all her money on it like a precious firstborn child. Libby had been jealous of how she had actually made hers nice, as Libby and Matt's was still very much a work in progress, with windows in need of replacing and decor in need of updating. "God, Han, can't you talk about anything else?" she had snapped, when Hannah had gone on too long about a particular type of wallpaper. Hannah knew it was a sore subject for Libby and had tried not to take offence, merely changing the topic. When she got in, she sloughed off her bag and coat and went immediately to the spare room where she had her desk. She rifled through the drawers to find her address book. She knew it was old school to have contact details actually written down, but she had messed up too many phone-to-phone transfers or deleted people's numbers by accident or in a rage, and she knew that a hard copy was a sensible thing to have. She flipped through the pages with shaking hands until she found Libby's parents' details. Should she try Libby or Matt one more time first? Was calling Libby's family house overkill? She just couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. There was that niggle, an instinct that something had shifted and that the world was not as it should be. She messaged Libby and Matt again, a quick, "Hey, everything okay?" and waited, her toes tapping against the floor with pent-up energy. Nothing. The messages went to double ticks as delivered, but as much as Hannah willed the ticks to turn blue to indicate the messages had been read, they refused to cooperate. She could call Libby's mum with some sort of pretense, couldn't she? A spurious question about some random thing that, if something had happened, would be immediately forgotten about in the chaos of whatever might be going on. But if Libby's mum knew nothing, then she wouldn't look weird, her calling in a panic. That would be best, wouldn't it? Hannah didn't want Libby to think that she was ratting her out to her mum for her poor behaviour of standing her up. Hannah just needed to know that Libby was safe, and right now she had nothing to say that she was, and her gut was telling her that she wasn't. Like a friendship sixth sense. Hannah typed Libby's parents' landline into her phone and waited. She took a deep breath just as someone picked up. "The Winston residence. Speaking." "Oh, hi, Mrs. Winston, it's me, Hannah." There was a slight pause as Libby's mum remembered who Hannah was. "Oh, hello, Hannah dear, how are you? It's been a long time." That much was true. In their uni years, Hannah had visited Libby at home and been invited to some family events. In their grown-up years, as Mrs. Winston would describe them, she had barely seen them. It might even have been Libby and Matt's wedding when they had last seen each other. "It has. I hope all is well with you," Hannah asked, leaving the door open for her to tell her about any upsetting situation that might have occurred. She could feel herself holding her breath in anticipation of the bad news she feared was coming. "Mostly, thankfully. Philip had a scare last year, as you know, but he's on the mend now, and I've been so busy I've not had time to be anything other than well. Honestly, they never tell you that retirement is going to be so busy." Libby's dad had been unwell? She hadn't said anything. Hannah wrinkled her nose as she tried to recall if Libby had mentioned it. Nothing came to mind. I'm glad he's okay now. She paused. I was thinking of him. She didn't want Laurel to think that she hadn't known or that she didn't care. So what can I do for you?